Level 1. You are 22 years old. Political science degree. $80,000 in student debt. Your salary is zero. You work for free because someone who has been doing this for 20 years told you this is the only way in. So now you're here at 11 p.m. loading yard signs into a storage unit while everyone else went home 3 hours ago. You make phone calls from a script. Strangers hang up before the second sentence. You stuff envelopes for mailers most people throw away unopened. Nobody learns your name. You are labor, invisible and replaceable. But you notice something the others don't. The candidate never actually talks to voters. He performs for them. The real conversations happen in a different room. Smaller, fewer people. Men in shoes that cost more than your rent, arriving through a back entrance. You are never in that room. But you start watching who goes in, how long they stay, what the candidate's face looks like when he comes out. That gap between the stage and the back room is the only education at this level that actually matters. Then one afternoon, a senior consultant watches you catch a scheduling conflict that 3 people above you missed. He looks at you a moment longer than necessary. "What's your name?" he asks. 3 weeks later, you have a job offer, $28,000 a year. You accept without negotiating. First mistake won't be your last. Level 2. The title sounds like something. It is not much. You manage volunteers who cancel last minute. You chase turnout numbers in precincts leadership. Wrote off months ago. You file reports at midnight that get skimmed in the morning and ignored. But something changes at this level that changes everything after it. You get access to the internal data, not public data. Anyone pulls that. Voter contact history, donor records going back 3 cycles, internal polling numbers that never see a press release because the real numbers and the public narrative are 2 different documents living inside the same campaign. You start reading both every morning, side by side. A candidate running on fiscal responsibility, burning through donor money at a rate that would embarrass a Vegas weekend. A law and order platform representing a district with the worst police response times in the county for 6 consecutive years. The gap between public message and internal reality is everywhere. Once you know how to look, one afternoon the consultant drops a file on your desk without explanation. Canvassing data. Precinct inconsistencies. Tell me what's wrong with this by end of day. You find 4 discrepancies in 2 hours. One shifts the turnout projection for an entire district. He reads your notes standing at your desk. Doesn't sit down. There's a real opposition file coming next week. I want you on it. That is the moment the job actually starts. Level 3. The opposition researcher. You spend your days inside FEC filings, county property records, and court documents from cases settled quietly enough that nobody remembers them, but not quietly enough that they disappeared completely. You develop one specific skill above everything else. Finding the gap between a politician's public record and their actual one. Delaware business registrations, nonprofit 990 filings, deleted social media pulled from cached archives and repost histories. Then you find the LLC, a 4-term assemblyman. His entire platform is fiscal accountability and government transparency. The LLC is registered in Delaware under a name 2 letters different from his wife's maiden name. It received $340,000 over 4 years from 3 municipal contractors. All 3 won public bids in his district during the same window. The bids were competitive. The winner was the same every time. None of it has ever been reported. It's sitting inside procurement records that are technically public but practically invisible because nobody looked at them together. You hand the documentation to one specific journalist 3 weeks before the primary. He loses by 11 points. You feel something when the result comes in, not pride, something quieter. The first real understanding of what you can do when you know where to look and who to tell. But here is what opposition research actually is at its core. Finding things is only half the job. The other half is knowing what someone has already found about your candidate and making sure it never surfaces. Research is a weapon. Weapons work in both directions. Level 4. A governor's chief of staff calls at 9:47 p.m., voice flat, controlled. Someone who has been managing panic for 6 hours and is now very good at not sounding like it. A sealed civil court document from 1997. An opposing researcher pulled the case number through an indirect reference in a separate filing. The story drops in 72 hours. Your first instruction surprises the room. Do not issue a denial. Denials don't kill stories, they feed them. A denial gives the journalist a response to print alongside the original, doubling coverage and extending the news cycle by 48 hours minimum. You don't fight the story, you shrink it. A major infrastructure funding announcement, real numbers, real projects, has been sitting in the communications pipeline for 2 weeks. You schedule it to drop at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the damaging piece publishes. Then you call 3 journalists separately, giving each a different exclusive angle on the funding package. Now 3 reporters have personal investment in a story, running parallel to the one you cannot stop. The sealed document story runs 16 hours of coverage. The infrastructure story runs alongside it and gets picked up by 2 wire services. By Thursday, the governor is answering questions about job creation. You didn't make the problem disappear. You made it smaller than something else. But something shifts here that has nothing to do with technique. Problems stop arriving after they go public. They start arriving before. A records request submitted, but not yet answered. A source who had the wrong conversation. A photograph that hasn't surfaced yet, but will. Managing a published story is damage control. Managing a problem before it becomes a story is something else entirely. You're about to learn exactly what that requires. RONS Level 5. A congressman's chief of staff calls you directly, not the congressman. The distance tells you everything. Former staffer, internal emails documenting a pattern of conduct. Attorney already retained in DC. You spend 48 hours on research. Methodical. Everyone has a gap between their curated story and their actual record. You find hers. You don't use it directly. You make one call through an intermediary. The message is never stated explicitly. It doesn't need to be. Her attorney stops returning calls within 11 days. You invoice $180,000, 9 days total. But here's what actually changes at this level. You are not solving problems anymore. You are the reason problems don't escalate in the first place. Your name moves through rooms before you enter them. Situations dissolve before they require solutions. And once that's true, the relationship reverses completely. You stop working for candidates. Candidates start working around you. Level 6. 2 lists. Never written. Only in your head because anything written is evidence. First list. Names of people currently in Senate seats, cabinet positions, federal court appointments, because of calls you made and information you moved. Second list. People who were supposed to win, who didn't, because you were on the other side. One Supreme Court nomination stands above everything. A federal appellate judge whose record had been considered disqualifying by 2 previous administrations. You identified 3 genuinely movable Senate votes. You found what each one needed that had nothing to do with judicial philosophy. Each senator arrived at their yes vote through what felt like independent reasoning. Confirmed 51-49. No journalist ever traced a thread back to you. A senator calls Wednesday afternoon, Presidential Exploratory Committee. Genuine theory of the race. Real funding. You listen to the full pitch. You already ended his campaign yesterday. 3 calls, a major donor redirected. A state party chair quietly shifted. An endorsement that simply decided to wait. Nothing illegal. You never do anything that could be called illegal in a room with a prosecutor. You moved information to the right people before he could. I'll have to pass, you tell him. Timing isn't right. He thanks you and believes the conversation was about your schedule. Power is not what you can do. Power is what you can stop. Here's what nobody tells you going in. You don't accumulate power in this career. You accumulate debt. Every favor creates one ode. Every secret you hold means someone watched you hold it. Every buried problem sits in someone else's file the same way their information sits in yours. None of it expires. There is no retirement, no graceful exit. You either remain useful enough that keeping you is worth more than the alternative, or you become the next problem someone gets hired to fix. Somewhere right now, a 22-year-old is loading yard signs at 11 p.m., watching the back rooms, noticing the architecture, filing away the same things you filed away when nobody knew your name. He is going to be very good at this. That's how it continues. Subscribe. New video every week.